Today we're going to be talking about the template that I made called Adventure Titles. I've gotten a lot of feedback from people who have purchased this template saying that it renders very slow. And that is kind of true. It does render slow. It's kind of a heavy project, and there's a lot going on in this template that people should be aware of. As you can see, I'm clicking through the timeline right here, and I'm on a really fast computer, and it takes my computer a long time just to refresh one frame, and this is at half resolution. So I'm going to show you guys a few techniques today to speed up your process with this particular template. And what I like to use in my process is a lot of proxy renders. If you're not familiar with proxy renders, I'm going to include a link in the description to another video that gets into detail about proxies and how they work. But the purpose of this video is just to show you how proxies can greatly speed up this particular template. So let's concentrate only on this title screen, which is called Interstitial 1. I'm in the main render comp here, and we're looking at Interstitial 1. You can use this as your title screen, or you can change this text out to whatever you want. Of course, mine says the name of my company, which is Creation Army, and you can change this to anything else. And of course, you can change out the image or video in the background to whatever you want. So to change it out, we're going to double click on Interstitial, and it's going to take us into the comp. As you can see in here, we've got a lot of reveals, we've got a lot of masks, but down here at the bottom, this image back here is called photo number 6 cascade. That's going to be in our photo video zones. If I search for the word photo, if you go to this folder in the project, so we're going to go into photo number 6 cascade, and in the project folder that's located right here in photo drop zones, let's go into photo number 6 cascade. The reason it's called cascade is because photo zone number 6, which is another pre-comp which contains this photo or footage, has been made into a 3D layer, and it's receding into the background, and this optics adjustment layer is sort of bending the outer edges toward you, and then we've got a radial fast blur, which is just operating on the colors. So from frame to frame, even in just this one sub-comp, you can see how long things take, and I'm at half resolution. This is a 1920 by 1080 comp, and it goes on for 10 seconds. And even on my pretty fast, pretty capable computer, things are taking a very long time just to render single frames. This comp by itself is not really that involved and not that heavy, but once it's put into one of these main scenes, sorry, everything is blank here at this moment. Once it's put into one of these main scenes, it's actually duplicated and happening in a few different places. So as you can see, it's right here. It's in a couple different places. So the computer not only has to render all of these layers and all of this geometry, but it's got to handle 2 instances of photo zone number 6 cascade. So to speed up the process, what I'm going to do is I'm going to proxy this entire comp. And I know that it's only used in this main comp until about the 4-second mark. As you can see at about 3 seconds and 22 frames, we don't even see it anymore. So I'm going to render 4 seconds of photo number 6 cascade. So I'll just dial in here 4 seconds, and I'll hit N so that our timeline goes from 0 to 4. And I'm going to send all of this to Media Encoder. And to do that, you can go up to Composition, Add to Media Encoder, or Command Option M. Once it appears in Media Encoder, what I like to do is render with QuickTime PNG. And what that's going to do is it's going to give me almost uncompressed video at a pretty decent file size. If you've got a laptop or a MacBook Pro, or some sort of PC laptop. Sometimes those laptops don't have a whole lot of hard drive space. You might only have a couple hundred gigs, and maybe your laptop is pretty full already. So rendering this at QuickTime PNG is, for 4 seconds, is not really going to take up that much space on your hard drive. On this computer, I've got 3 terabytes. I keep it pretty clean and backed up, so I'm not worried about file size. I don't care if a video that I render out is 40 gigs. I'm pretty good with storage, but just be aware that proxy rendering is going to create many videos on your hard drive for use later on. So be aware of that. So I like to go with QuickTime, and then I pull the video codec to PNG. You can do ProRes if you want to, but your file size, again, might be a little bit bigger. I'm going to do 100% quality, match source, which is 1920 1080, 30 frames per second. And with this, I don't need an alpha channel, meaning transparency, so I'll keep the depth at 24. If you are rendering a video with an alpha channel or transparency, change this to 32-bit, and your QuickTime PNG movie will retain that transparency. And again, we're only rendering 4 seconds. So I'm going to choose where I'm going to render this. I'm going to save it into Adventure Titles, and I like to make a folder, a single folder, where I put all of my proxy renders. As you can see, I've already rendered a ton of proxies for this project. So I'm going to save this as photo number 6 Cascade. As you can see, I've already rendered it here as an MP4. I did that just for demo purposes. You can render out H.264s or MP4s if you want to conserve space, but just be aware that that MP4 is going to go back into your project as a proxy and then be rendered again later on, so there is a chance of double compression. If you're worried about quality and you want to keep out of the world of double compression, I would recommend doing QuickTime PNG, which is what I'm going to do right now. So I'm going to save it into my proxies folder. I'll hit OK, and I'll render. Now you can see that my computer is already estimating 4 to 5 minutes just to render this. So imagine if this was placed in my main timeline unrendered. My computer would have to, and your computer will have to, render each one of these frames and think about all of the optics and the radial fast blur, any color correction that you might have on this. All of that will have to be calculated within this huge stack of other effects, layers, masks, video, all simultaneously. And unless you have a $10,000 Mac Pro, this isn't going to work for you. And it's going to be extremely inefficient. So I always recommend rendering proxies, and that's what I'm going to do right now. So let's wait for this to render. Okay, photo number 6 Cascade.mov has finished rendering. So now I can come back over into After Effects, find photo number 6 Cascade in the project. Here it is right here. And you see this little white square next to it. That means that a proxy is linked to it but not active. To activate or link a proxy, you can just right click on it and choose Set Proxy File. And then of course we're going to navigate to Adventure Titles, scroll down to Proxies, and then here is the video that I just rendered. In 4 seconds, it's 239 megs. So be aware of file size. If you've got a big hard drive, but you want full quality, this is probably not a number that's going to scare you. But if you're on a laptop and you have limited file size, this is probably going to be too big. And that's why I recommend possibly going with a high quality H.264, which in this case is going to be 1/10 of that size. There's going to be a little quality loss. So it's up to you. But anyway, choose photo number 6 Cascade, in other words, the proxy movie that we just rendered, and hit open, you'll see this square next to it turn white. And when we go into this pre-comp, once again, now you're going to see this red bar down here. It says proxy enabled. That red bar means that we are now looking at the movie that we just rendered. And you can see that when I click through, now things basically render or refresh almost instantaneously. The reason for that, right here in the viewport, what we're seeing is movie. We are not seeing these layers. And I can prove that to you by turning these layers off. You can see that if I scrub through a little bit, we can still see the movie. So in other words, the movie that we just rendered is sort of overlaid over the top of this comp so that we see it in the viewport. And that's what this red bar is telling us. I'm going to turn all these back on. Okay, now we can go back in interstitial number 1. And I know that these two layers are now proxied. And if you click through the timeline, now they go much faster. Okay. They also have these, there's all kinds of other layers happening in this comp. If we go to triangle pattern, horizontal reveal mask, it's this comp right here. And again, this is just a geometric pattern that I made that just sweeps across the screen and reveals a photo from black. You know, it's used as a luma mask from black to white. But if I just click any one place on the timeline, my computer has to think about and calculate all of the opacities of all of these different diamonds controlled by this delay controller. But we can also make a proxy of this comp. We know that we just need it to go from black all the way through to white, and it pretty much stops at about the 2-second mark. So you can limit your timeline to just these 2 seconds, and you can add this to Media Encoder and render a proxy of this whole comp. And this will actually save you a little bit of time because it's used in multiple places throughout the project. So again, I'm going to add it to my render sorry, not render queue, media encoder. You can add it to render queue if you want. In fact, that's a different technique which I'll show you right now. Let's say you want to add this whole comp to the render queue directly in After Effects. Let's hit Command Control M, and now it's added to our classic render queue. I don't recommend doing this for very long videos, but we know that this is just a 2-second video clip. Now, in the case of this video, we're just going for black and white and gray values. So I don't need transparency, and I know that I don't need it to be the highest quality that my computer can put out. So an H.264 is going to be just fine. I'm going to change the format to QuickTime and then change this to H.264. A good data rate is, for this, maybe 5,000. So I know that I'm not going to get a huge file, and I don't need audio, and that's about it. We know that we're going to get a 2-second video out of this. And the cool thing, again, about proxies is that, yes, I'm rendering only this frame range, and you should always render from the beginning of your comp, from 0. Proxies will only play from 0. The cool thing is that after the 2-second mark, the proxy will simply hold on this pure white frame for forever. No matter how far you go down the timeline. You could go down the timeline 3 hours and it would still just hold on the last frame of the proxy, which will be this frame right here, fully white, and that's all we need. Let's go back into our render queue, and I'm going to output this again to adventure titles, proxies, triangle pattern, horizontal reveal mask, all right, and QuickTime MOV. Even though it's going to be an H.264 is fine. I'll hit save. Okay. Before I hit the render button though, let's go back to our output module. You can actually make After Effects set this movie as a proxy automatically when it's done rendering. And to do that, you come up to your post-render action and choose set proxy. I'll hit OK. Now I'm going to render this, and it should go relatively quickly. It's going pretty fast. Even on a slower machine with a lesser video card or a laptop, this comp is going to render pretty fast since it's pretty much just black and white with no crazy effects or 3D or transparency or motion blur or anything. So it finished rendering, and right away the red bar comes up on this comp. So right now we're looking at an H.264. Oh, and I did make a mistake. It turns out that I do need to render with transparency. You can see that the diamonds now just sort of come on, and that's fine. We can always find this comp in the project, triangle pattern horizontal reveal mask. So it's this one right here. This comp, as you can see, is proxied. So I'm going to turn that off, and it turns out we are going to need to see transparency. If I turn on the transparency grid, you can see the transparency of the diamonds, the diamond pattern. So once again, same frame range. I'll add it to the render queue. I'm going to go with QuickTime, but this time instead of H.264, I'm going to use PNG because it'll give me an alpha channel. I'm going to change the channels to RGB plus alpha. That's going to give me the alpha channel. I'll choose post render action, set proxy once again, and I'll hit OK. I'm going to overwrite the movie that I just rendered right into proxies. Hit save. It's asking me, do you want to replace it? I do want to replace it, and I'll hit render. Again, it should be a pretty quick render. It'll probably be only a little bit longer than the H.264 render that we just made, only because we're also rendering an alpha channel, so it's a little bit extra work for the computer, but it's going very quickly. And once it's finished, it sets itself as a proxy, which you can see right here. Let's go into this comp, and now this comp is proxied and renders almost instantaneously. You can see that I can scrub right through it, and the comp no longer has to calculate any of this data on any of these layers. It really just has to play back the movie that I just rendered. All right, let's go back into interstitial. And so that is right here. It's layer number 14. You can see is my triangle pattern horizontal reveal mask is now a proxy that is revealing another proxy. So everything's going really fast now. All right, let's try something else. Grid pattern number 8. Now this is not proxied. This comp itself is not proxied. It's this triangle pattern that I made with all these little crosshairs, and then we've got random crosses appearing here and there. So this comp itself is pretty light, but let's go into Particles Pre-Comp 3. See, this is just a random assortment of circles that appear. You can proxy this if you want to, but this comp is so light that it really doesn't need it. Let's go into Particles Pre-Comp 2. Same thing here, super light. These are just X's instead of circles. And the same thing with Particles Pre-Comp 1. These are just crosses. If you want to, if you really need to, you can proxy this whole comp. Just remember to do it with an alpha channel. If you don't want to take up a lot of space on your hard drive, then don't. This this whole comp is very light. Even this triangle grid pattern really doesn't need to be proxied. You can, if you want to, proxy one single frame to apply to this entire timeline, and that might save you a little bit of render time. In other words, this whole grid, every time that I'm pressing page down, every time that After Effects has to render one frame, it has to think about all of the geometry going on here and all of the reptile and all of that stuff. So you could, if you wanted to, hit Save Frame As and add it to the render queue and switch this to PNG. So it'll be a PNG with an alpha channel and set as proxy, and then of course you put that in your proxy folder. I'm not going to do that right now. You can if you want to. So let's close up a couple of those. Let's go back to interstitial scene. Let's turn on some of these soloed layers. So there's our grid pattern, which is also revealed by one of these other diamond masks that I made. This is also proxied somewhere on my hard drive, as you can tell by this red bar. So this proxy movie is revealing the grid pattern underneath as we see this whole comp. Okay, text source. Let's jump into one of the text sources. These usually don't have to be proxied. This is an outline comp. Let's go into the text source number 6. Here's where you can change your text. If we go to you know, these two red layers, these are our main text layers. So let's call this project title. And now let's jump back one into text source number 6 outlined, and now it's outlined. And one more back into interstitial. So those don't really have to be proxied. Let's jump into maybe bars opener, which are these bars, these diagonal triangles in the corners. This is a comp which is just made of these two solids that sort of lean in, and that's it. Those really don't need to be proxied either. Those are extremely lightweight, and those are revealed by this comp that we proxied. So another use of a proxy right there. Let's hide that. Vignette, light leaks. This whole comp right here I've proxied as well. You can see that it's 30 seconds long, and what I did was I rendered and proxied this also to my hard drive, so that it's running on top of interstitial number 1, and its blending mode is add, and it's got a blue tint to it in this case. So there's a lot of proxies that are all running simultaneously to create this whole comp. Let's see, I think I have something turned on that I shouldn't. There we go, triangle pattern is turned on. So you can see now that I click anywhere on the timeline and things render really fast, much faster than before. So this interstitial gets used back in the main render comp with a lot of proxies within it. But you can also proxy this whole entire comp so that when it's used in your timeline, in your main timeline here, it will act as a movie. So let's jump back into interstitial number 1, and you can see that it only goes for about 4 seconds before it hides itself again. So let's add this whole entire comp into Media Encoder, and we'll render it as a QuickTime. I have a preset, QuickTime PNG with alpha at 30 frames per second. So again, to do that, that's choose QuickTime from this pull down. I don't need audio, so I've unchecked that. Use PNG, 100% quality, matching the size 30 frames per second, progressive square pixels, and then make sure that you use 32-bit if you want to retain your alpha channel. So I'll just put that into my proxies folder, and it's already in here, interstitial number 1 right there. So let's hit save, replace, I'll hit OK, and I'll hit render, and you'll see that since it's a collection of proxies all working together, you can see that now it's rendering relatively fast. The whole thing is going to take roughly 2 minutes on this computer. And once that's finished rendering, I'm going to go back into After Effects and set this movie as a proxy over this entire comp. So let's let that render out. Okay, my video has finished rendering. It was a little bit closer to 4 minutes, but that's okay. 4 minutes is pretty good. I mean, especially since you can throw something in a Media Encoder and use that 4 minutes to go and work on other things in After Effects and add them to your queue. 4 minutes is really not that bad. So let's go back to After Effects, and again, what I'm gonna do is go up to my project panel, go to my main comps, and find interstitial number 1, and I'm going to right click on it, set proxy to file, and I'm going to point it to that video that I just rendered, interstitial number 1.mov. 265 megabytes, not too bad. And you can see the red bar appear, and of course it's got this white box next to it indicating that it is now a proxy comp. You can also see the path, or the name of the movie being proxied right here, interstitial number 1.mov, and it gives you a little bit more information on its time code and number of colors, etc. So I'll push this over to the side, and now this entire comp is now a movie with an alpha channel, which you can use in your project. And I'm just scrubbing through this at half res, and it's basically instant feedback. Okay, so this is much faster and much more efficient than if we were just looking at all of the raw math that goes into making this whole stack of layers. Let's go back into our render comp, and now that I have proxy rendered interstitial, it now blends right into my scene, into my main timeline here in render comp, and I can just scrub right through it. And when it swipes away, or when it gets swiped away by the next phase of the project, what I want to look at underneath is my next scene, or my first scene, which is scene 1. In this case, I have it proxied here. I've already gone through the process of going into scene 1 and proxy rendering photo number 1 cascade, which was this. So this is a movie as well. And this whole scene is also proxy rendered with all of the masks and everything, all proxied and rendered together. So everything is much lighter weight now that everything is proxied. All of these are proxied, coming into scene 1 and then going back into our main timeline. So proxy, one after another, and now my entire timeline is something that I can actually scrub through, and now I can make creative choices on where I want to move things and retime things or extend things, or maybe even change timing based on music or anything like that. And I don't have to wait an eternity for my viewport to update with all of the raw After Effects data. So I highly encourage you to go through and do the due diligence of going into each and every scene and rendering short little proxy movies for a lot of your scenes, especially photo cascade. I mean, every one of these scenes, if you go down to the bottom, has this photo cascade phenomena going on, which you can see right here is proxied. Let's do a little test here in photo zone 4, which is not proxied. Let's actually change the image. I had all these snowboard images. Let's find another snowboard image. Okay, so here's this snowboard image, which I had in here, but I didn't use. So if I want to use this, but I jump back into photo number 4 cascade, you can see that it's still the original top-down GoPro footage from the first snowboard photo. And the reason for that is we're looking at a proxy movie right now, which has not been updated. So let's find photo number 4 cascade. Let's go to photo drop zones. Photo number 4 cascade is right here, and let's deactivate the proxy. As soon as I do that, you can see that now we're looking at the comp again with the updated new photo. So again, you're going to go ahead and add this to your render queue and run a proxy of this movie, and then when you go back into scene 4, you'll see the new movie in here. Again, we're looking at a proxy here, so this is the first snowboarder. As soon as I turn off the proxy for scene 4, it'll auto-update, and we'll be looking at the new snowboarder. So this is now an updated, slow-moving comp. So, in a nutshell, proxy. Use lots of proxies. It actually does help later on in terms of efficiency. I'm going to go back to the main render comp to make the final point here. As long as everything is proxied here, this whole render of about 40 seconds will take my computer about 5 minutes to get through. 5 minutes is really fast. If you compare that to not using any proxies, as a test one time, I rendered this whole composition with no proxies, and the render time was well over an hour. I think it was close to 2 hours. And I'm running a really fast computer. If you're not running a very fast computer, that render is going to be overnight. And that does not work well in the world of editing. If you need to look at a rough cut, then you're going to need to render these things out very quickly. So taking a little bit of extra time to make proxy movies is going to eat up a little bit of space on your hard drive, but in the long run, it's going to free up a lot of time for you to make creative decisions here on the timeline to render out a final piece that renders quickly and is timed correctly. So, thanks for joining me on this tutorial. I hope this cleared up any kind of confusion, and I hope this helps you get through adventure titles or any other project in the future. Thanks for watching.